the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, hello, and we're back to another episode of the NFL Super Friends here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, 2/3 of the NFL Super Friends, no Evan Swords, 49ers Hub this week. Evan will be back next week, but JP Acosta is here of SBNation.com. JP, good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing great. It was a game on Monday night. It was one of the games I've ever seen, but happy to be here.
I'm not going to lie. Couldn't do it. There's just some games you're just not watching. Like, I didn't even have it on my second screen. As much as I love Josh Dobbs, I can't force myself to watch Bears Vikings for 2.5 hours, 3 hours on Monday Night Football. I just can't do it.
It was not fun. Well, it was fun for a little bit, and then it got really not fun very fast.
Speaking of not fun, a guy who watches a lot of not fun football every single Sunday, Jarrett Bailey of USA Today, the Pump Fake, Behind the Steel Curtain. Jarrett, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I did have to watch that game, considering it is the job of JP and I to watch and talk about even the worst of games. But I was also watching Monday Night Raw for the return of one CM Punk, and gotta say, not my favorite return promo ever. But so I had it on two screens, paying more attention to the wrestling side of things than the football side of things. And CM Punk scored as many touchdowns as the Chicago Bears did. So there's that.
There is that. It's the little things, folks. It's the little things. I do know the Bears love throwing screens. That I do know. The Bears are in on screens. And I'm very curious in the Justin Fields market. What does that look like this offseason? I don't know.
I don't know, man. I think it's pretty evident they're going to clean house.
Yeah.
If that means polls as well, then whatever. But my goodness, like Eberflus Luke Getsy is not the answer. And if that means that they got to go new quarterback, I mean, if they do go with a new regime, that's likely what they're going to do. You got to ask yourself what teams need a quarterback. And there's
Insert NFC South team here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely in the conversation. Could it be a Tampa Bay? Could it be your Atlanta Falcons? I think maybe. We'll see. But there will be a market for him. I don't think it'll be gigantic, but there will be a market.
There will be a market. I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, from here, maybe the Falcons show interest, but the Falcons could have also had Justin Fields outright during draft time. They could have just simply drafted Justin Fields, and they went with Kyle Pitts instead that particular year. So I don't know. I have my doubts that Justin Fields is a future Falcon, but I am curious where he ultimately ends up. But folks, that's it for the Monday Night Football reaction. Not a big one on this edition of the pod. Just not a lot happened there. It doesn't matter. This one doesn't matter. We're not going to dive into it like what we saw last Monday night on this very show, but that's the nature of the beast. Some Monday nights we're going to have an immediate reaction where we are like, what just happened? This is not one of those Monday nights. Instead, we're going to pivot to a team that won their football game and I think had the most fun of anyone over the weekend. It's Mr. JP Acosta's Jacksonville Jaguars with a big win over the future, that being CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, in some great red uniforms, which I love. I don't know why those are not their primary uniforms. The red looks really good. And when you think Houston, you think red, like the Houston Rockets, the Houston Dynamo. Like, I think they should lean way more into that red. The Houston Cougars. It's just, I like cities, speaking of color combinations, like Jarrett, your Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh, black and gold. Like, I like when cities just stumble on a color scheme across the board. It's cool. Houston, don't overthink it. Get rid of the blue. Just go red and white, red and yellow, whatever. But you have something good there because the red looks really clean with those helmets. But that is neither here nor there. JB Acosta, what did you see from Trevor Lawrence winning the duel against CJ Stroud on Sunday afternoon?
I mean, those were two really good quarterbacks going head to head. I mean, I think a lot of CJ Stroud's, like, just overall him being amazing, which he was, again, phenomenal. I think the plays they made out of structure really stood out to me. We kind of forgot that Trevor Lawrence is really, really, really good at this. Like, he's a really good football player. Someone on this show said that CJ Stroud was everything Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be, and I pushed back on it. I am still taking that victory lap because Trevor Lawrence is still very good at football. I think one of the issues with the Jaguars this year has been not being able to find answers when their offensive line can't block. And they kind of found those answers in this game, which is just let him throw downfield. You get the ball out of his hands. They went max protect a lot. They went 7-man protections, two-man routes, throw downfield. He made some sick throws in the mid-range area. The throw to Calvin Ridley where it just zipped right past Derek Stingley. Phenomenal throw. There was another Ridley out route that, man, he just zipped it. And I think the thing about this Jaguars game against the Texans was in a battle between two teams with some really high-level talent. The Jaguar stars played better at the most important times. Josh Allen was the best Josh Allen in football on Sunday, and he completely shut down that game at the end, near the end of that drive. Near the end of the drive, Trevor Lawrence was really, really good, and now you have the division on lock. And now, not only are you thinking about, hey, we can win the division, you're thinking, hey, we can win the AFC. Like, we can get the number 1 seed in the AFC. Because the next biggest game you have is a home game against Baltimore. You win this game against Cincinnati on Monday Night Football, and then you go in and beat Baltimore, you have a really good shot of locking up that 1 seed, because the Chiefs still have a really, really daunting schedule ahead of them. And the Ravens, you'll have the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Ravens. So now you're not just thinking, oh, let's just win the division. Now you're thinking, let's get home field advantage and get that first round bye to try and get everybody healthy, which in year 2 of the Doug Peterson kind of regime would be a phenomenal, like, this would be way ahead of schedule for this team.
What did you see in terms of just watching CJ Stroud up close in this one? What's the closest similarity, or what makes you, if you're a Texans fan, why would you feel best about CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence being potentially on the same tier one day?
Because I think the thing that stood out to most of me about CJ Stroud this game was how he handled pressure. You know, a lot of the stuff that came out during the draft process was he's kind of robotic under pressure. That was kind of some of the questions I had about him. But he was beating pressure that Mike Caldwell and the Jaguars threw at him. He beat it with athleticism. He beat it with his mind. He beat it with his arm. He beat it with his legs. He was consistently finding answers. And that's something a lot of young quarterbacks struggle with, finding answers versus pressure. Not only that, but finding their answers versus pressure. You know, Josh Allen's answers versus pressure aren't going to look the same as Joe Burrow's. Those are two completely different players, two completely different caliber of athletes. But they're two of the best quarterbacks in the game in the ways that they address and adjust to pressure. CJ Stroud is finding his answers, whether it be by escaping the pocket and using his legs, which he killed the Jaguars with on Sunday, or just beating it with his mind. You know, getting the ball out real quickly, finding the blitz and diagnosing it, finding that hole in the zone. It is very repeatable. It's something that gives you a really high floor as a quarterback. And then you just add on the high level throws that he makes. You got a guy, you have a certified dude, and the Stroud versus Lawrence should be the next like great quarterback rivalry within the division in the NFL.
I like it. On the flip side, though, the Steelers keep winning, unfortunately, for Mr. Jarrett Bailey, and he's just going to go to war with his own fan base week over week because they just keep winning. His guy, Matt Canada, was fired, which I don't believe happened before last week's pod, so we didn't really get to discuss what that looks like for the Steelers. But what did you see for week 1 without Matt Canada? What looked different? I know Deontay Johnson didn't realize that he had a game to play yesterday in this one that I saw on Twitter briefly. But what did you see from the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first week without Matt Canada, Jarrett Bailey?
Well, the offense looked like good, which is weird. Now, the one thing that really stood out was the utilization of the middle of the field. And I think that Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan made it a point to do it right away because the first play from scrimmage for the Steelers was a play action pass to Pat Freiermuth over the middle for a gain of 24. And if you look at Kenny Pickett's passing charts over the past 2 weeks, not one pass over the middle of the field. The fact that they did it the first play, I think that was them saying, look, we recognize the issues that were here. We're gonna try to fix that. And if you look at Kenny Pickett's passing chart throughout the entire day, it looked like an NFL passing chart. This was the best game. I think, the most complete game he's had in his career. He went 24, 33, 278. Should have had a touchdown. He threw a dart to Deontay Johnson in the end zone that he should have caught, but he did not. So I can't even blame Kenny Pickett for that. Overall, though, he made a lot of really good throws. What
was his best throw?
There was a slot fade to George Pickens that he put right in the breadbasket, gained 43. He threw there was a one-on-one ball to Deontay Johnson down the right sideline, gained 39. And he's talked about this in the past too. Like, hey, if I see one-on-one coverage, I'm going to give my guys a chance if it's there. So when he did that against Cincinnati, more often than not, it worked out. And that doesn't cancel out, the previous 22 games where he hasn't looked great. But seeing this was promising. And if I'm going to be critical of Pickett, then got to give credit where it's due. Like, you look at how he stacked up against the rest of the league. He was 7th in the league this week in EPA per play, 2nd in CPOE. So I'm not saying that all of a sudden, okay, now we can see Kenny Pickett's a franchise quarterback. No, I'm not saying that. But like I said, credit where it's due. He played well. The offense looked well. And for the first time since week 2 of 2020, the Pittsburgh Steelers gained 400 yards of offense. So I think fans were sitting at home, pointing at their TV, going, "We effing told you." Like, this shouldn't have taken so long to finally do in terms of firing Matt Canada. And the first game without him, they go over 400 yards, which they never did with him as OC. The last time they did it, Randy Fichtner was the offensive coordinator. And Kenny Pickett had his best game as a pro. I don't think that's a coincidence. Do I think that makes Kenny Pickett all of a sudden like a franchise quarterback? No, because he still has his own set of problems. But I think that with more competent play callers, more competent offensive coordinators, and an offensive game plan, his ceiling goes up a little bit, and he played well.
Why did they not go over the field, though? Like, if you had to get in the mind of Matt Canada, why was he so averse to throwing over the middle with Kenny Pickett?
If I knew that, I'd be the Steelers offensive coordinator right now, man. Either he didn't believe that Kenny Pickett could, which I kind of tend to lean that way, because no offensive game planner, no offensive coordinator at the NFL level in their right mind goes into the week and said, "All right, we're not going to use the middle of the field. We don't need that." Unless you're Luke Getsy, apparently he also does this. So there is a precedent for it with Luke Getsy and Matt Canada both seemingly having the same game plan, which is outside the numbers, screens, and that is it. That I don't know, man, but the fact that he lasted as long as he did is inexcusable, and it's malpractice. And the fact that Mike Tomlin let it go on this long, he deserves a lot of blame for it too. But like you said, they keep winning. They're 7-4. They own the top wild card spot in the AFC, and their next 2 games are against the Cardinals and the Patriots. They should win both of them. I think they'll go 1-1 because it's the Steelers, and they don't have a right to underestimate any team right now, just because offensively they're still not great. Their quarterback isn't great, and they're playing a Cardinals team where this feels like a trap game, where they're going to underestimate a bad Cardinals team. But Kyler Murray's still there, and I could see them losing that game and then rebounding on Thursday night and beating the Patriots. So if I had to guess right now, they'll be 8-5 after these next 2 games. But if you're 8-5 going to week 15, that's a damn good spot to be in terms of the AFC playoff race.
I think the funniest stat that I found about Matt Canada is in the game before the Steelers hired Matt Canada, the Steelers had over 400 yards of offense. In the 44 games with Matt Canada as offensive coordinator, the Steelers did not have over 400 yards of offense.
Nope. Not once.
The first game after firing Matt Canada, the Steelers have over 400 yards of offense. Like, that's just incredible. Like, it's an incredible bit,
And a lot of this too, and I've talked about this at ad nauseum at this point behind the steel curtain. When we're trying to figure out, okay, who are they going to bring in next as offensive coordinator? Well, they just got 2 more potential candidates with former Steelers running back Deuce Staley and Josh McCown both being let go by Carolina. But a lot of things the one thing that a lot of fans point out is Mike Tomlin going to bring in a guy that he feels can threaten his job as head coach? And are the Rooneys going to cough up big money for a big name offensive coordinator? Like, at the end of the day, I don't think that people on the outside realize just how poorly Art Rooney has run the show ever since Dan Rooney passed away. And like, if not for Ben Roethlisberger covering up a lot of issues before he retired, like, you look at the ownership, it's not so much different from the Pirates, where the Steelers at large are a cheap organization that don't like to spend a lot of money, that keep things in-house, and that hurts them a hell of a lot more than it helps them. So as much as I would love to see them go out and get somebody that could really help this offense in terms of hiring an offensive coordinator, I'm not going to hold my breath for it because of the reasons I just pointed out. And do I think that there is some of the whole Mike Tomlin doesn't want somebody in the room that could, like, not necessarily threaten his job, but like the situation with Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin, it's very clear that Mike Tomlin's fine. But if you bring in like somebody like an Eric Bieniemy to run the offense next year, that's a different dynamic. So I do think that there is some merit to that.
Is that why Byron Leftwich and Todd Haley are coming up right out of the gate here as next OC? Is that there's no real job threat there in terms of Mike Tomlin's job security, where they're trying to both get back in the league basically and kind of revitalize their careers? And I don't know, are you interested in a rekindling with Leftwich and or Haley? Because the Leftwich stuff is wild. Like we're that feels like forever ago that Leftwich was the OC of a Super Bowl winning team. That feels like forever ago now.
No, JP and I talked about this on the last Pump Fake. And as he so aptly pointed out to me, because JP, I defer to JP when it comes to like schematic stuff because he is smarter about that one than me. And what he pointed out is, and what I've since gone back and tried to learn a little bit more about, is the way that Byron Leftwich, his scheme works. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, JP. It's more of a vertical based scheme with a lot of power running. And the one thing that helped mask any of those issues was that number 12 was under center. You don't have Tom Brady in Pittsburgh right now. And you don't have a guy who can run a vertical based scheme right now in Kenny Pickett. So that is the challenge when it comes to, that's the pushback when it comes to hiring Byron Leftwich. With Todd Haley, like there was no reason to fire Todd Haley when they did. Mike Tomlin wanted a scapegoat because they just lost to Jacksonville in the playoffs in a game that they shouldn't have lost, and somebody had to be fired. And the Steelers had one of the best offenses in the NFL for a 3-year stretch, and they let go of Todd Haley because somebody needed to be fired. And apparently it wasn't going to be Mike Tomlin. It wasn't going to be Keith Butler. So Todd Haley was the unfortunate scapegoat. In terms of how Kenny Pickett would look in a Todd Haley scheme, I don't know. I mean, when you had Ben Roethlisberger and Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, and at one point Martavis Bryant and then Juju Smith-Schuster, like, you had a lot of weapons and a quarterback with a huge arm that could get it to all of them. Steelers have some weapons right now, but it's younger, some of them not proven, a lot of immaturity, and a quarterback who doesn't have a big arm. So trying to find someone who can, because it's going to be Pickett in 2024. Like, it does not matter how he looks the rest of this year. The Steelers will give Kenny Pickett a 30. I would bet my life on it. So whomever comes in is going to have Kenny Pickett for at least the first year of their tenure. And I think that could scare some people away, but we'll see.
JP, you had Myles Garrett in there at MVP last week on the pod, but without looking, who are the two leaders in sacks right now? Who's tied?
Let's see. Two leaders in sacks. Is Danielle Hunter one of them?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Danielle Hunter and probably TJ Watt or something?
It is TJ Watt.
Baby.
Is TJ Watt kind of deserving some MVP buzz? Does he deserve the same? No. Is he having the same kind of impact for the Steelers as Myles Garrett is?
I wouldn't say he deserves MVP buzz. Defensive Player of the Year conversation, sure. MVP buzz, no. Just because, I mean, for the Browns and the Steelers, I mean, you look at just how vastly better the Browns' defense is than Pittsburgh's in every statistical manner. Myles Garrett has had a bigger impact this season, I would say. Now, TJ Watt has had a fantastic year. And if you wanted to say that he's played better than Myles Garrett, then fine. But Myles Garrett I'd have to pull up the, I don't know if you have him in front of you, JP, in terms of the pressure stats and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure right now it's like Max Crosby and Myles Garrett and just about every like hurry statistic, pressure statistic. It's those two guys that are pretty much owning the 1-2 spots.
TJ Watt's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year.
I didn't say he was gonna. No, I think he's in the conversation. I don't think he's gonna win it.
I think his impact is important to the Steelers defense, but I also think TJ Watt gets, and it's also like kind of schematic of how the Steelers let TJ Watt play, but he kind of freelances a lot. Like he has the leeway to kind of just go do what he wants when it comes to rushing the passer and going and making impact plays. He also gets a lot of unblocked sacks, which is cool. I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, but I think when it comes to impact on a team, I think Myles Garrett is still the leader for Defensive Player of the Year. If Deron Bland just continues to score on every interception he catches, he's probably going to get a lot of votes. Max Crosby would probably be my second vote because there's no reason that the Raiders should be in the spot where they are. But Max Crosby is once again going to lead almost every player on the defensive line in snaps and pressure rate and top 5 in sacks. I'd also put Dexter Lawrence up there for Defensive Player of the Year because if Max Crosby isn't leading the defensive lineman in snaps, it's Dexter Lawrence as a 340-pound nose tackle and is also leading all defensive tackles in pressure rate. Like, that's absurd, you know? So I think there are a lot of really fun names at Defensive Player of the Year, but I just don't know if TJ Watt is going to have he's not going to have the historic sack season to kind of back up the not having the same amount of pass rush wins or pressures as the other guys.
I think it would take him breaking the sack record this year, like officially breaking it, not just tying it. Like he would have to probably get like 23, 24 sacks. Because right now, if he goes on like a sack and a half pace the rest of the year, he would break it. But I mean, that's a tough pace to keep for a 7-game stretch.
We'll see. We shall see. JP, when you look at what happened with the Panthers here today, David Tepper with another firing across Charlotte FC and the Carolina Panthers, a lot of firings early on here in his Charlotte team ownership days. But this was kind of wild. I think we thought that he might be a one and done on this very program for a while, but I mean, Josh McCown out, to Staley out. Carolina cleaning house across the board, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think Jim Caldwell is like the offensive advisor the rest of the way, which, again, Jim Caldwell should have just been an offensive coordinator for like the last 10 years. Like the guy, Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator, I don't know, Super Bowl appearing coach. Yeah, I've just always liked Jim Caldwell. Like, he's just a solid OC and should have been calling plays for the last couple of years for somebody. But JP, with Frank now out in Carolina, how big of a deal is this? How much does this make you worry about Bryce Young's future and development in Carolina? And what would you do if you're in David Tepper's shoes going forward?
So, first of all, I think this is, among the potential coaching openings, this has to be one of the worst in the NFL. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, you have no first-round draft pick this year. That belongs to the Bears. Second of all, your free agents include Jeremy Chin and Brian Burns, who still hasn't been paid yet. You got to figure out a way to pay both those guys because those are impact players on the defense. Third, you have no impact offensive player. And without a draft pick and without a lot of cap space, you're stuck with Jonathan Mingo, Laviska Shenault, and Adam Thielen for one more year. And the offensive line has not played very well. Fourth, David Tepper is notoriously impatient. This is his fourth head coach he's hired for the Panthers since 2018. He is going to have a short leash. He has always been far too involved in the day-to-day workings of the Carolina Panthers. This is not a job that's going to be like a first priority, like, hey, I want to go coach this team. And it's sad because you have the former number 1 overall pick, but nobody's going to be like, hey, I want to coach this team because there's nothing there. There's really nothing there. I worry a little bit about Bryce Young because I don't want him to generate scar tissue from this first year. You know, it's kind of like when Trevor Lawrence was in his rookie year at the Jaguars and he had receivers running into each other. Like the hope was you don't develop the bad habits. You don't make the bad habits worse habits. You don't end up like a guy like Kenny Pickett, who has not developed from the scar tissue that he had the first year in Pittsburgh. I don't have a lot of faith. Don't have a lot of hope for the Panthers. it's going to be really tough to convince any like hot shot offensive mind to take this job when you don't have a lot of resources and you don't have an owner who's willing to say, hey, you go do this, let me back out of it. So, and
This sounds like Jim Harbaugh to me.
I don't think Jim Harbaugh is going to take that job.
Okay.
I think Jim Harbaugh is I know that he coached the 49ers, but I think he is a Midwestern coach. So if there's any NFL job he's going to take, it's the Bears. But the first name I thought of that made me laugh when it comes to this job is Lincoln Riley. That would be incredibly funny to me. That man has not won meaningful games at the college level, so let's bring him to the NFL level. But in all seriousness, I think if you can get a guy like Bobby Slowick away from the Houston Texans, that might work. Frank Smith, offense coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. I would love to see Bryce Young in a Miami Dolphins kind of schemed up offense because he and Tua share a lot of similarities in how they approach the game, how they play the game. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. But I think it's the pass game coordinator for the 49ers as well. But it's going to be really hard to convince a coordinator, a up-and-coming coach to take this job because of how little the resources are in this room. In Carolina, you don't have a lot you're working with.
A name out of it might be a little bit out of left field, but I saw I think it was Emery Hunt from CBS Sports recommended Pep Hamilton maybe if nobody else really wants to. I mean, he was a head coach in the XFL and did really, really well. He's been on multiple NFL staffs as, offensive specialist, passing game coordinator, things of that sort. So if we want to see, somebody get a first-time head coaching gig, he could be a name that's in the mix. It'd be fun to see. But I mean, like JP said, the fact that for all the reasons you just pointed out, you don't have a first-round pick, you got no impact players, like you're thrown to cereal boxes for the next year. And I don't know what's Carolina's cap situation look like right now, JP. I don't know if you have over the cap in front of you, because even without having the draft capital, if you got money and you can try to lure somebody away to be a go-to receiver, then that's cool. But at the same time, who the hell is going to want to come play there when you've got an owner who's too hands-on, who's too impatient, and like if I'm T. Higgins. And Carolina calls I don't want to go to Carolina. So I think it's going to be hard to lure big name guys there to be like a go-to receiver, and especially because like we've seen situations where it's worked out. We've seen AJ Brown in Philadelphia, Stephon Diggs in Buffalo, but we've also seen DJ Moore in Chicago, and the Bears are still bad. So those are things to weigh if you're a receiver. Like, yeah, if they have the cap space and can throw money at a guy like T. Higgins, that's cool. But if I'm T. Higgins, I'm very much monitoring the situation and looking at what their coaching staff is before I even consider doing that.
So they currently have for 2024 the 13th most cap space in the NFL. But this is without paying Brian Burns yet.
Right.
And without paying Jeremy Chin. I think it would have been in their best interest if they traded Brian Burns to try and get the first-round pick back. But now that you have him on the team, he is on your team. You better extend him. Like, you better keep him around because that's a really good football player. If you look at their upcoming free agents, I mean, Justin Houston's going to be a free agent. DJ Chark, free agent. Frankie Louvu, who's been phenomenal, free agent.
He's been very good.
Brian Burns, free agent. Jeremy Chin's going to be a free agent. Troy Hill's a free agent. Most of your impact defenders are going to be gone. So you got to find out a way to pay all those guys, but also lure in offensive players for free agency, but also be able to draft on days 2 and 3 and find impact players there, which is very, very hard. Like, I think finding Amon-Ra St. Brown, finding guys like Brock Purdy on day 2 and day 3 of the draft have kind of skewed like what people think day 2 and day 3 of the draft are. It's really hard to find impact players on those days. So now you got to do that. You're not going to have the blue chip first round pick. It's looking rough. if you take this job, you have to be guaranteed that you're going to get at least a good 4 years, 3 to 4 years to try and turn this around.
I think it's also a job that maybe if you're a coach who got fired after one stop and you think this might be your only way back at another opportunity where, look, like you said, with somebody like you need the younger coaches, the guys who might not get coach opportunity number 2, you have to be very selective and very careful here in terms of contract and timeline and that sort of thing. But I wonder if because the situation is so dire that Carolina goes with a bridge guy without announcing it's a bridge guy, where Vic Fangio,
like a David Culley situation.
David Culley kind of, but I mean, Vic Fangio would not surprise me. Maybe you go back to what's his name? Why am I blanking on? Sean McDermott. If he gets fired by Buffalo after this year, I can 100% see a swap
hire Sean
there.
McDermott. I don't think that's a bridge though. Like if they hire Sean McDermott, then that's.
I could see a swap there, couldn't you? Like some kind of thing where it's a soft landing, and because I just feel like it's ending with McDermott this year in Buffalo, and I don't think he'll be out of a job very long.
So I don't think Vic Fangio is going to take a head coaching job. I think he's perfectly fine being a defense coordinator. Some guys are cool with just drawing up cool plays. Like, I think Ben Johnson very quietly is in this range. Where like he doesn't have to be a head coach. He's cool drawing up plays only. Vic Fangio is really just fine drawing up defenses. I mean, he basically has revolutionized modern defense in the NFL next to Bill Belichick. Anthony Lynn, also a potential name there, assistant head coach for 49ers, running backs coach right now. I don't know if this would happen, but it'd be incredibly funny if David Tepper called Steve Wilkes again and was like, hey, do you want to come back and actually get the job? If I was Steve Wilkes, I'd be like, hell no.
Yeah, no.
You
kick rocks.
Yeah, go kick rocks. You didn't hire me the first time. You're not going to hire me now. It's just going to be a really tough. It's going to be a really tough hire for a new coach. Like if you're a first year guy, I wouldn't go to Carolina. I think this is you bring in an experienced person who knows how to like right the ship or at least get some baseline level of play. Maybe an NFL.
I think it's kind of like Lovie Smith in Houston.
Maybe like an NFL coach who was out of the league for like a year or so. Like,
who's the best answer here then?
That's what I'm trying to think of.
Zimmer?
You know what?
I don't hate that.
I don't hate it, but I also don't.
What is he doing now, actually? What is Mike Zimmer up to right now?
Bro is chilling with Minnesota Vikings payout money. He is fine.
Zimmer is just like, I mean, he's 67, but Zimmer just quietly, he was never, like, he's 72-56-1 as a head coach. Like, you're looking at these seasons, it's like 7 wins, 11 wins, 8 wins, 13 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins.
The last thing Mike Zimmer was doing, he was an analyst for Deion Sanders at Jackson State.
Oh.
So I don't know if Mike Zimmer would actually want to come back to coaching in the NFL because of the way it ended in Minnesota, where it was very like rigid, hard ass.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if he would want to come back to that, but
I just feel like Mike Zimmer is pissed off all the time.
Yeah, you never know, and I don't know if you want those vibes around.
I might. All right, here's a fun one. What about you said a guy who's been out of the league for maybe a year. How about more than a year? Similar to like the Gruden route. What about Marvin Lewis?
I honestly would like that. I think Marvin Lewis deserves another shot in the NFL as a head coach. And
with Cincinnati for a very long time.
He should be able to right the ship or at least get them back to a baseline level of play. Yeah. Like you just got to find someone who can bring some stability. But I think Tepper is going to go for the big swing here. I think he wants big fish. Like he wants to go bold, flashy. But he also
Harbaugh would probably be the biggest fish that he could land in that situation then, right? In terms of big and flashy.
Yeah, but I don't think Harbaugh would take that job.
I don't think he would either. But I'm saying if they're going to push for big and flashy, that would be who I would expect them to push after. I mean, I think a lot of Panthers fans are circling Ben Johnson, but I don't think he's taking that job. If he does take a head coaching job, it's not going to be Carolina. So Lou Anarumo, I don't know if he would go there. It's tough. So what happens?
I just don't think it's gonna be a good hire,
like this,
right? Like I just don't think it really matters because I think they're just kind of stuck. And then if you're like Bryce Young, I mean, are you just at the point because of where this situation is? It's not really on Bryce, or have you seen enough from Bryce this year where you're like, I think Bryce just might not be a franchise long-term answer at quarterback? Which way are you leaning more?
I think it's year one. I think you cannot make a good judgment of Bryce Young in year one with everything around him going wrong. I mean, he had 2 different play callers taking over at 3 different times.
Yeah.
He has his best receiver is a 30-plus Adam Thielen. There's not much to work with here. So you need to get somebody to bring him back to at least a baseline level of play, which is why you kind of need the experienced guy.
Did you see that Mingo reception or not?
Where he jumped out of bounds?
Mm-hmm.
He did a people's elbow to the turf rather than get his feet in. Yeah, that was hilarious.
That's one of my favorite things I've ever seen. And I did love the comments, like one of those where I'm like, oh, why? Like it's one of those jarring things where you didn't need to do that. Like it was one of those where I don't even know if you're a position coach, like what you even say. Like Mingo has run that route so many times in his life, and he just was like, I'm going to freestyle here. I'm going to do whatever I want to do right now.
Like another thing when we're talking about Bryce, like that's what he's working with. He's working with Jonathan Mingo, Laviska Shenault, Adam Thielen. Like they signed Miles Sanders, who's done next to nothing. They don't have anything there. And for a team that like actually had expectations to like maybe make a run at the NFC South coming into this year, with the fact that they had Bryce Young and Frank Reich was coming in and they built this really like good staff. They brought over Ejiro Evero from Denver. Like this was an exciting offseason for the Panthers, and shit had just completely hit the fan with Tepper being too hands-on, the multiple change of play callers. It's just a lot to put on him. And like it's not, when we look at it like on a scale, like 0 being urban in Jacksonville compared to, I don't know, what was like the perfect, like Dak and his rookie year in Dallas, where just everything was perfect. Like it's a hell of a lot closer to being 0 than it is being 10. So I don't think we can put a lot of this on Bryce. Even yesterday, like Bryce made a few plays where you're like, okay, like there's clearly something there. Like he made a scramble. He broke, I think, like 37 tackles in one play to run for a first down. Like clearly the athleticism is there. Yes, the size is, it's a question mark, being how small he is and whatnot, and with the offensive line issues that they have. But I agree with JP where we can't just be like, yep, there's nothing there with Bryce Young. Way too much going against him as a first-year quarterback, where we can make any sort of decent analysis of how he's played.
Let's go to this. Who you got? Russell Wilson or Sean Payton? Who is most responsible for the Broncos win streak? Let's start with you, Jarrett.
I mean, you gotta say Payton. And that's no disrespect to Russ, but we saw what he was last year, and now we're seeing what he is this year, and a lot of that has to do with Sean Payton coming in. But you look at Russ's numbers, like eye test, if you like watch any of Denver, like those don't necessarily reflect how he's played, but he's played a hell of a lot better than he did last year. And a lot of that boils down to the fact that he has one of the best play callers of the last era in his helmet on the sideline. And they started off roughly and started off 1-4, but now they've won like 5 in a row, and they're right in the thick of being in the AFC playoff race. The defense has gotten a lot better too since they allowed 70 to Miami. So I think everybody after that game kind of reassessed the season a little bit. I think really after the loss to the Jets, because I think that was the last time they lost, if I'm not mistaken. Just really had to reassess the entire situation and figure out where to go from there. But Sean Payton's done a really good job. Russ has done a really good job too. Like he's had 2 of the craziest touchdown passes of the season. The one to Cortland Sutton against Buffalo that he threw the crazy.
There was one against Buffalo and there was one against the Vikings that were both pretty insane.
And he threw one in the red zone against Cleveland yesterday that wasn't as like crazy as those other 2, but I mean, he's running around and guns it to the front pylon for a touchdown. Like we're seeing a lot of old Russ come back, and I think coming into this week he had 17 touchdowns and no picks in the red zone. That's pretty damn good. So, and we've talked about this on the show before. They're not asking him to be, peak Russ. They're asking him to hand the ball off. And if we get in a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, okay, Russ, convert this 3rd down. That's all they really need him to do. They don't need him to be Superman. He can just be, like, if we're looking at NFL Super Friends, if we're looking at it from a Super Friends perspective, like they don't need him to be Superman. They don't need him to be Batman. They just need him to be like Green Lantern. They need him to be Martian Manhunter. Like he can be this complementary piece to the Justice League that, when he does his part right, then great. As long as everybody else, Sean Payton's being, Batman and the defense is being, the Flash and Wonder Woman. Everything else is taking care of business, but they need Russ to play his part too. So he's been a vital part of what they've done, but he hasn't had to be, the main reason why they've been successful.
So in this win streak, which started in week 7, from week 7 on, per Ben Baldwin's site at The Athletic, the Denver Broncos early down pass rate is 44.3%, which is 31st in the entire NFL. Like, I think before the season, I wrote about what a successful Denver Broncos offense looks like with Russell Wilson as your quarterback. I think this is what I kind of expected. You want him to kind of game manage the game along, but when it comes time to make the throws, this is the entire thing with Sean Payton. Sean Payton's basically told Russ, if it's not there, just run. But when it comes time to make the throws in the high leverage situations, like Jarrett was talking about, in the red zone, on 3rd downs, that's when Russ gets to cook. It's not exactly like you're making a 5-star meal. It's just TV dinners. Let Russ make a TV dinner. And I think where the improvement has come is along the offensive line with the running game. I think Russ has done really good in terms of not making the backbreaking mistakes that he was last year. But I also think a lot of it is due to, he hasn't had to throw the ball a lot. He doesn't need to throw the ball a lot with this offense, with this game plan. And the defense has played phenomenally since getting Baron Browning back. I do think there is something to, like, you get to play Minnesota and Cleveland and the Packers as 3 games, as this 5-game win streak. But you did beat Buffalo on the road, and you also did beat Kansas City in a game where the Chiefs only scored 9 points. So there is, it's not just a lot of noise against bad teams. It's, they've played pretty well. And I think the biggest thing is Sean Payton finally getting we know what a successful offense for Russ looks like. And it might not be like the high-flying, explosive, 2020 Seahawks first half of the season Russ offense, but it's effective, and it's helping the Broncos win games.
And it's interesting. I just think I think it's fun to see this Sean Payton bump here down the stretch. And I mean, they're an interesting team if they make it into the playoffs. Like, obviously they're not going to win the division, but depending on the matchups, that could be spicy. I think they're one of the more spicier teams that you don't want Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. And the way that the Broncos are playing right now, where, to y'all's point, they've kind of figured out the best way to utilize Russ. The defense is a lot better than what it was. I don't know. Is there a team that they match up when it's still a little early to think playoff matchups, but in terms of the division leaders, who potentially matches up the worst in a first round spot with the Broncos? Who would want to play them the least?
Ooh, who would want to play them the least?
I mean, the Chiefs. But we're only saying that because this would be the 3rd time that they played them.
Yeah.
I mean, the other 3 division leaders are the Dolphins, who put 70 on that team.
Right.
And the Jaguars, who I don't think are a good matchup for the Broncos. And then the Ravens, who are the 1 seed right now. So by process of elimination, it's the team that you already beat so far this season.
That'd be interesting, man. The meltdown of the Chiefs if they were to go down to the Broncos in the first round of the playoffs.
Here's the thing with that, man. I'll say this about that. If the Chiefs were to play the Broncos again, I think the Chiefs win by 4 scores. And that's nothing against Denver, but I think that there is something to say for, the Chiefs. One of my closest friends in media, Matt Verderame, Sports Illustrated, made this point to me. It's not that the Chiefs don't care, but when at this point in the year, like it's not the beginning of the year where you're really amped up, and it's not, necessarily the final couple weeks where like you're gearing up for the playoffs. It was a middle of the year. Like they could have got off the plane and be like, all right, what city are we in? Oh, we're in Denver. All right, yeah, I guess we'll go play. I just don't think they could have been bothered. But when it's January and it's playoff time and the Chiefs are equally as amped up to play as Denver is, it's not a competition. So I'm not trying to take anything away from Denver. They beat them. They deserve to win, and they made Patrick Mahomes look bad in the game in which they beat them. But an amped up Chiefs team against an amped up Broncos team, I'm taking Kansas City by a comfortable margin.
Of course, but I don't know. When it comes to the question Chase asked about,
I wasn't shitting on your answer, by the way, JP.
I don't know. I'm just not comfortable choosing them against a team that they lost by 50 points to.
No, absolutely not.
The other two teams are really good. So.
Absolutely. Yes.
There you go. Jarrett, buy or sell? It's time for McDermott to go in Buffalo after the latest close loss to the Eagles, where they were better than the Eagles for the majority of that game yesterday. It was a fun game. I very much enjoyed watching that from start to finish, but ugly loss for the Bills once again. Is it time for McDermott to go in Buffalo?
It's absolutely time for Sean McDermott to go. It was time to go after the loss to Denver because I wrote about this on USA today because I needed to get everything out about how I feel about the Buffalo Bills. So they're 6-6 right now. They have had 3 losses this season where Josh Allen has put them up with less than 2 minutes to play, and the defense has blown it. And we can talk all we want, as everybody loves to do with Josh Allen, and point the finger. Yep, Josh Allen's fault. Bills are 6-6. Josh Allen's got to be better. Well, Josh Allen is the judge, jury, and executioner of the Buffalo Bills. And when he's expected to do so much and is throwing the ball more than the average quarterback and is running the ball more than the average quarterback, naturally there's going to be the up in turnovers per game. But you look at his interception rate, he's got a 3% interception rate right now. Tua and Jalen Hurts are each hovering around 2.7. Patrick Mahomes is hovering around 2.6. It's not as if he is turning the ball over drastically more than other quarterbacks are per attempt or per touch. It's just the fact that he is expected to do more per game where the numbers get jacked up a little bit. So, but back to my point about the defense blowing games. It wasn't Josh Allen who let Mac Jones march down the field with less than 2 minutes left and look like Joe Montana to score and win with less than 10 seconds left. Josh Allen didn't have a 12th guy on the field against Denver on a missed field goal that led to the Broncos being able to kick a game-winning field goal again. Josh Allen didn't get ultra conservative with 20 seconds left and take a knee, tuck his tail to go into overtime, and then play super conservative defense on 3rd and 4, playing soft coverage, leading to a Devontae Smith catch that then led to a Jalen Hurts touchdown run where I think it was Jordan Mailata was talking after the game. He's like, we were incredibly surprised that the Bills didn't see the quarterback draw coming because it's such a vital part of what we do. And Mike, if you look at the all 22 of it, Micah Hyde cuts across to like the right side of the field. And as soon as that happens and Jalen pulls the ball to run, you already knew it was over because there was no safety help over the top. So none of those are on Josh Allen. They could very well be 9-3 right now. And if they were, Josh Allen would probably be at the top of the MVP conversation because of how well he's played. He leads the NFL in total touchdowns by a comfortable margin right now. And by and large, Sean McDermott has let them down. And it's not just a this season thing. It's the 13 seconds thing against Kansas City. And over the past 22 months, he has spent every resource that he can in times of trouble finding scapegoats. 13 seconds against Kansas City. Oh, Leslie Frazier, mutual parting of ways, air quotes around that. Offense is struggling without, after Brian Daboll leaves. Oh, that's Ken Dorsey's fault. Granted, Ken Dorsey wasn't doing great, but, everything that has been wrong with the Buffalo Bills over the past almost 2 years now can be pointed back at Sean McDermott. And now the bell's tolling again, and he is out of people to fire, and it's time for him to pay the ferryman, for lack of a better term. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you are doing a disservice to your team. You're doing a disservice to Josh Allen if you roll him back out as head coach next year. They can't do it. They cannot bring him back.
Is that the best job in the market potentially this offseason?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you get the quarterback. Like that's
It's going to be like, if you're a head coach, it's going to be the Bills and probably the Chargers as the two best coaches, just because, you get to choose between Justin Herbert and Josh Allen. So those are two pretty alluring jobs.
I think my biggest thing with Sean McDermott, especially when it comes to the Eagles game, is the biggest reason the Bills lost that game is because Sean McDermott coached to not lose.
Yes.
And Nick Sirianni and the Eagles coached to win. They played to win. Not trying to score with 20 seconds left and you have a timeout.
With that transformer at quarterback?
And not only that, when last Thanksgiving you did the same thing and won against the Detroit Lions, it looks very funny. But, I just think this Bills loss was the perfect encapsulation of the 2023 Bills. Josh Allen plays great, but this team is not good. Like, the team outside of Josh Allen is not good. Gabe Davis is not a good receiver.
No.
Like, he is, and I tweeted this, he is football J.R. Smith. He will make the contested catches and the highlight reel plays that look awesome, but then he'll also forget where the ball is and just completely lose track of the ball on a game-winning touchdown. The Bills' defense is not good right now. I mean, they played their best game of the year, like arguably the best game of the year. I mean, the Commanders game was real early, but they played their best football for like 3.5 quarters against the Eagles, and then the Eagles figured out what their problem was. But this was just the Bills. This is what the Bills are this year, and they are not good enough. And that falls more on Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott than it does like any of the players on the team. I would like to say though, the Eagles are the best team in football. I think there are going to be a lot of comparisons made to the Vikings last year with how many games they win by one score. This is completely different. And I wrote about it today. This is completely different from the Vikings because the Vikings were one of the most high variance teams in the NFL. If you go to FTN Fantasy, check variance, they're one of the most high variance teams in the NFL. They had a lot of fluky plays go their way. An example, the Justin Jefferson catch in Buffalo last year.
Dude.
99 times out of 100, the catch does not happen. But in this reality, it does. The Eagles are not a high variance team. They are one of the top 10 teams in variance this year, which just means they are consistently playing good football. And what they do is, it's just like the Eagles are so much a reflection of the Philadelphia like city and like Rocky as a boxer because they're never out of a fight. You have to knock them out. You have to put them away because as soon as you give them a sliver of daylight, they're going to blow it up and they're going to score and they're going to get back into a game. It's winning in the margins. It's winning within it's being as aggressive as they are on fourth down. I hate that they run all the QB draws on 3rd and long. It is their go-to play. I think per Sports Info Solutions, Jalen Hurts leads all ball carriers on plays that on non-scramble carries on 3rd and 7 or more. Like that is not a sustainable way of getting offense, and it's going to hurt Jalen Hurts in the long run. But the reason they do that is because they don't have to get all those yards back on that play. They can get it to 4th and 1 or 4th and inches or even 4th and 2 if they wanted to. And they have the most efficient play in football, and they can continue their drives. They have the dudes necessary to continue to lull and kind of figure things out with the offense. And when they do, they have Devontae Smith. They have A.J. Brown. They have Jalen Hurts, who made a phenomenal throw to Olamide Zaccheaus to give them the touchdown, give them the lead. And then they have the defense that has dudes, they can just out-dude you. And that's what makes them the best team in football because they not only do that, but they also know they have those dudes. They can maximize those margins. They can go for it on 4th downs. They can be as aggressive as they are trying to go down the field and score every time. And that's what we mean by playing to win versus playing to not lose. It's the difference between a Sean McDermott and a Nick Sirianni this year.
And you talked about the throw to Zaccheaus. So set up by a really good coverage disguise by Philadelphia, where Philadelphia got pressure off the left side, and Bradbury came off of the deep route and stayed underneath. Josh didn't see it. He throws to the flat. Bradbury's still there, and then that sets up the touchdown throw to Zacchaeus. So really just they are as complimentary as a football team as you can get in the NFL right now in terms of the dudes that they have on both sides of the ball. And even when they don't play their best football for 3 quarters, they're still going to be in it. And, if that's the case, they're going to be hard to beat. Where, and as corny as it might be, where, Jalen has the confetti or whatever as his wallpaper on his phone or whatever, like, I would not shock me whatsoever if they are back in the Super Bowl in February and if they're winning it this time around, because this is as complete a team as there is in the league.
And they're doing all this without really having answers on offense. I wrote about it today. Their offense is kind of taking a dip in efficiency this year. Like it's taking a small dip, but it's noticeable. But it doesn't matter because they're 10-1. Like they can do so many different things to opponents. And again, like you said, they can hang around with teams. Like they don't have to blow teams out of the water up front. Like they can continue to hang around. They can lurk around. And then as soon as you make a mistake, they're going to jump on you. It's like, y'all remember that movie Real Steel? Where
never saw it.
Okay, it's about robot boxing. It's really cool.
Okay, I do remember it now. All right.
Yeah, and I think Hugh Jackman is like the main character in the movie.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite parts of the movie is a fight where the main character robot is just ducking in the corner, getting battered, getting destroyed. And at the last moment, Hugh Jackman's like, wait, and then now, and then the other robot fighter fizzles out. And then the main character robot starts going in. That's the Eagles. They can withstand all the punches you throw at them. They can go down 24-14 like they did against the Bills and come out to win the game. They can take fights into the 11th and 12th round and they will win those fights because that's just who they are. They are battle tested. They have the best offensive line in football. Even without Lane Johnson, they're doing some really cool stuff. But they can their floor is so high when it comes to like NFL teams. Their floor is, we can just run the ball down your throat for the entire game. And you're not going to do anything about it. Especially when Jalen Hurts gets back healthy. Like they have so many options. And I think that is the most impressive thing about this team.
I like it. Well, we will leave it there on this edition of the NFL Super Friends. Jarrett, what can the good folks check out from you over on the internet this week?
Yeah, like I said, I wrote about the Bills and how Sean McDermott is really letting them down right now. So I wrote about that today on USA Today. Power rankings as well. Those are out now. If you're listening to this as a podcast, they are out. And then I did a fun list. We've had a lot of like, who's that guy playing quarterback this season? So I wrote about 5 quarterbacks that nobody remembers, but who actually started games in the NFL. So if you want to go read about Brian St. Pierre, please go read that little list over at USA Today. And then everything behind the steel curtain. I do want to shout out my staff though, behind the steel curtain, because when me and Kate took this over, like right before training camp, we had to build it back up from scratch, and we didn't know how this thing was going to look. But in terms of like our numbers over the last couple months, we have set records for our Steelers site over at SB Nation, and we are very thankful for everybody who's reading, but also for the staff who has done a tremendous job. So can't thank everybody enough for reading that, but also to our awesome staff. So very thankful for everybody who's reading the stuff behind the steel curtain and USA Today. You're helping me out very much, so I appreciate that.
There you go. We love to see it. Jarrett. And subscribe to the Pump Pick on YouTube.
Please do that.
To Jarrett Bailey's channel. JP, what about you? Establish the Fun, SB Nation NFL podcast, SBNation.com in general. What can the good folks check out from you this week?
So, of course, every Friday, Establish the Fun. We got another 3-pack of fun things coming at you. I don't know what it's going to be about this week, but with conference championships beginning in college football this weekend, going to be some fun things, going to be some fun games going around. Like I said, wrote about the Philadelphia Eagles today and why their 10-1 record means they're actually just very good at football. Also wrote today about firing Ohio State head coach Ryan Day for the same reason that a lot of people want Sean McDermott fired. Going to be tweeting a lot, watching a lot of football, watching a lot of film. So to follow along. I'm also posting film on Threads now. I didn't realize you could do that. So follow on Threads at JPCosta32. And then we also have a podcast, Sorry No Podcast today. Started with my friend, started some different group of friends. And we just talk about everything when it comes to football, college football, NFL, things of that nature. So just follow along on Twitter, see what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
There you go. We love it. We love it, folks. JP, Jarrett, thank you guys as always. Evan, miss you this week. Have you back next week. And that's another episode of the NFL Super Runs. One of your favorite things to listen to each and every week. So appreciate you all. And I will talk to you all next week.